Hi everyone. So my project is called Chasing the Summit: 48 Journeys to 4,000 Feet. Some background about my project. In the summer of 2018, I hiked in the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire for the first time. I chose to hike a mountain called Mount Chikura, and it was the hardest hike I've ever done in my life. It was rocky and steep and very, very challenging, but I was rewarded with this excellent view at the summit, and I absolutely fell in love with this region and wanted to do more hikes in the Whites. So I began to research some, and I kept coming across this thing called the 4,000 footers. So I decided to investigate more. And it turns out that there are 48 mountains in New Hampshire that are above 4,000 feet in height. And it's a tradition among Northeast hikers to hike all of them in order to gain entry to the 4,000 footer club. Upon hearing about this club, I was very intrigued and wanted to know more. And at the same time, I was deciding on what to do as my Keystone project for senior year of Kilachand. And I figured, due to the interdisciplinary nature of Kilachand, I could do something out of my human physiology bubble and relate my project to the 4,000 footers, which is what I ended up doing. So I decided to hike the 4,000 footers and then turn the experience into a project in the form of a website that combines both practical information with stories about my experiences. So my biggest question coming into this project is, why do people hike the 48? They're the tallest mountains in New Hampshire, but they're not necessarily the most beautiful. Some of them don't even have views. So I wanted to figure out why these mountains in particular, because it seems kind of arbitrary. So I figured the best way to illustrate that is to share a story about the most hated 4,000 footer called Owl's Head. So Owl's Head, it gets bashed on a lot in hiking blogs and websites because it's an 18-mile hike, and the summit looks like this. It's a pile of rocks on a patch of dirt in the middle of nowhere with no views. So going into this hike, I was a little hesitant, but I was trying to keep an open mind, and I'm so happy I did, because this ended up being one of the most fun hikes for me, and I learned a lot. For starters, this hike occurs in the Pemigewasset Wilderness, and in wilderness areas, trails are maintained to a lower standard. So it feels more like an exploration rather than just blindly following a trail. So it was really good for navigational skills. Also, there's several really formidable stream crossings on Owl's Head that require you to actually get in the water and ford across. And this is a skill that I had read about and watched some videos, but I practiced for the first time at Owl's Head, and definitely was a great time and learned a lot from that. And as well as going through this wilderness trail, after about 8 miles, you turn off onto an unmaintained herd path. So you're basically just following other people's footsteps up to the summit, and you go up this rock slide. So it's just a slanted piece of bedrock, and you're half hiking, half rock climbing, and it's a little bit scary but very exhilarating. And then you scramble through the rest of the forest and make it to this really remote pile of rocks, just very arbitrary, but then you come back. And even though this, like I said, was arbitrary, the journey was absolutely amazing. And despite the lackluster summit, it taught me a lot, especially about perseverance, considering that when you're hiking, something that I learned is that it's not like you're running on a treadmill, and when you're tired, you can just hop off. You are responsible for getting yourself out of the wild. So you learn to have a lot of physical and mental endurance that you might not otherwise have pushed yourself to. So it's important to pick hikes that are in your experience level, but also it's good to challenge yourself. And on Owl's Head, I never thought I'd be able to hike 18 miles, but I'm very glad for this mountain for teaching me that I could. And without further ado, I will show my website. Okay, so my website is called Chasing the Summit, and I made it using WordPress. So this is the homepage, and the first section is called About My Journey. I made several of these little slideshows using Adobe Spark. So this is just an introductory piece, and it goes over a lot of the same information I was discussing earlier about how I decided to do this project and what the 4,000 footers are, so that if someone who doesn't know what BU or Kilachand is, or who I am, can pick up and figure out what's going on with this website. So back to the home page. Here I decided to illustrate my three-pronged approach to the website. So first off, I'm trying to introduce the 48 to viewers, and I did this by including an interactive map as well as a timeline. Second up is the whole chasing the summit concept. So that's my goal, to empower people to hike the 48 for themselves and experience other wild places by providing guides and practical information. And the final aspect is some reflective writing pieces in which I detail my own experiences and allow others to experience the Whites without actually having to go there. So the first section is the map, which I made using Google My Maps. And I really would have loved to have this tool when I was hiking the 4,000 footer, so I kept that in mind. So each pin represents one of the mountains, and you can pull one up. So this is Mount Monroe, it shows the location, and then you can see there's a picture of the view from the summit and different metrics below that give information about the peak. One thing that I wanted to include in particular was what other peaks it's hiked with, because on a lot of the hikes you combine mountains. So I ended up doing only 25 hikes, even though there's 48 peaks, and that's really important to know at the beginning so you can consolidate your 4,000 footers. So I included that information. And then heading back over to the home page, next up is the timeline. And this shows the timeline of my summer of 2019 when I hiked all the 4,000 footers. It just shows the chronological pacing of it, and other people can emulate this order if they want, or just use it as a guide to understand how I organize my summer. And this is the guide section, so all the practical information for people who want to start hiking the 4,000 footers. So there's a glossary of terms, rankings by difficulty. I'll show this one. This is the 10 Essentials 4,000 footer edition. So the 10 Essentials are a collection of items that are used in backcountry travel to provide safety. So I tailored them to my experiences on the 4,000 footers. So for example, navigation is a 10 essential, and on the 4,000 footers, I use the White Mountain Guide and the All Trails app. So I talked about that some. Second 10 essential is a headlamp. So I showed which one I use, but I also included information about when you would need a headlamp on the 4,000 footers and why it's important to bring one to stay safe, sun protection, first aid kit, etc. So basically a gear list for the 4,000 footers. Leave No Trace is an article tailored to the 4,000 footers about conservation when hiking, and I'll show this one too. Best and worst of the 4,000 footers. It's a ranking based on how much I enjoyed them, and they're totally subjective, but a lot of people do these, and it's interesting to read to figure out what are the good ones or the bad ones. So I included some descriptions, and all of these images are my own, and it was really good to make use of all the pictures that I took this summer. So that's a taste of that. And finally, the reflections. So there's 8 chapters in total, and it's about 50 pages if you combine all of them, and those show different aspects of my experiences throughout the summer and my own thoughts about them. So to conclude, I'd like to discuss a bit about how my project can shed some light on the current COVID-19 situation. So there's a lot of debate about the emergence of this virus, but it seems to have come from a wild animal market. And that phrase alone shows how the pandemic is directly related to humans' prolonged systemic abuse of natural spaces. Because as we continue to invade the wilds, take animals from their homes, and destroy natural habitats, we'll be exposing ourselves to viruses that are lurking out there. And unless we change these practices, pandemics like these can and will continue to occur. So it's my small hope that with this project, I can inspire and encourage others to explore the wild for themselves in a safe manner and develop a relationship with it. And that will lead to our collective respect of nature and treating it as it should be. And some thank yous. I'd like to thank Kilachand for supporting me throughout this process, as well as my family and friends, many of whom accompanied me on the hikes, which was great. And most importantly, I'd like to thank my advisor, Professor Allison Blyler, for all of her support and guidance throughout this project. And this truly wouldn't have been what it is without you. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for listening.